Have you ever stopped to wonder whether you are truly free? We often think of freedom as something obvious. No walls around us, no chains on our hands, no locked doors keeping us inside. But what if I told you the greatest cages aren't the ones you can see? What if the most powerful prisons are the ones inside our own minds, built of fear, doubt, routine, and the stories we tell ourselves? Today, I want to share a story with you. A story that at first seems simple. A man, a parrot, and an open cage. But if you listen carefully, you'll find that this story will challenge the way you see freedom, and it just might change the way you see your own life. This story begins in a quiet little town just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. Life there is slow, filled with green hills, old oak trees, and the sound of birds singing in the morning. In that town lived a man named Robert Miller. Robert was 58 years old, a kind and thoughtful man, though life had left him carrying a heavy heart. He had worked for decades as a librarian at the local community library, spending his days surrounded by books, stories, and the quiet turning of pages. On the outside, his life looked steady and peaceful, but on the inside, Robert lived with a kind of emptiness he didn't often share with others. Years earlier, Robert had been married to a woman named Susan. She was the love of his life, a teacher at the local elementary school, a woman with laughter like sunshine and a heart full of kindness. Together, they had built a home filled with warmth, books, music, and simple joys. But life, as it sometimes does, dealt them a cruel blow. Susan passed away far too young, leaving Robert in a silence he struggled to escape. Before she died, Susan had given Robert a gift, a parrot, a beautiful green and yellow parrot with bright, intelligent eyes and a curious personality. They named him Oliver. After Susan passed, Oliver became more than just a pet. He became Robert's companion, his friend, and in some ways a living memory of the woman he had loved so deeply. Oliver lived in a large cage in Robert's living room, near a window that looked out onto the garden. The parrot's cage was well kept, filled with toys, fresh food, and plenty of sunlight. Robert spoke to Oliver every day, sometimes reading to him, sometimes just chatting about the little things in life. Over the years, Oliver learned to mimic words, short phrases, and even the gentle laugh that once belonged to Susan. But here's the curious thing. Oliver never left his cage. Sometimes when Robert was cleaning, he would leave the door open. The parrot could have walked right out, could have flown to the window, could have stretched his wings and disappeared into the open sky. But Oliver never did. He would perch at the edge of the cage door, look out at the garden, and then step back inside. It was as though the cage was no longer just around him. It had become a part of him. One evening, as the sun painted the sky with shades of gold and crimson, Robert sat in his chair by the garden sipping tea. He had carried Oliver's cage outside so his feathered friend could enjoy the fresh air. Looking at Oliver, Robert asked softly, "Do you ever wish you were free?" To his surprise, Oliver tilted his head, flapped his wings, and repeated a word he had picked up long ago. "Free, free, free." The sound sent a shiver down Robert's spine. He realized that maybe Oliver understood more than he had ever imagined. The next morning, Robert made a decision. He carried the cage into the middle of the yard, opened the door wide, and stepped back. His heart raced as he whispered, "Go on, Oliver, you're free! Fly!" Oliver climbed to the edge of the cage, looked at the open world before him, and for a moment, Robert thought his parrot might take off into the sky. But then, Oliver turned around and stepped back inside the cage. Day after day, Robert tried again. Every morning he opened the cage door. Every morning he whispered encouragement. And every morning Oliver did the same thing. He perched at the edge, gazed out at the vast freedom waiting for him, and then retreated into the only home he knew. One afternoon, Robert's neighbor, Jessica, stopped by to return a book she had borrowed. She noticed the parrot sitting inside the open cage and asked, Why don't you just let him go? He looks healthy. Maybe he wants to be free. Robert sighed. I've tried. The door's open every day, but he won't leave. I think he doesn't know how anymore. Or maybe he doesn't believe he can. Jessica paused, then said something that stayed with Robert long after she left. Maybe it's not about whether he can fly. Maybe it's about whether he believes he deserves to. That night, lying awake in bed, Robert thought about her words. And the more he thought, the more he realized something painful. He wasn't so different from Oliver. Since Susan's passing, he had built his own kind of cage. His routines, his quiet isolation, his fear of starting over, these were the bars around his heart. The truth was, his world wasn't locked. He could travel, he could make new friends, he could step out into life again. But like Oliver, he perched at the edge and then stepped back inside. The next morning, Robert tried something new. Instead of simply opening the cage, he gently lifted Oliver in his hands, walked him to the center of the yard and whispered, "It's okay. You're safe. You can do this." Then he lifted his hands toward the sky and let go. For a moment, Oliver panicked. His wings flapped wildly, his movements unsteady, as though he didn't trust the open air. He circled clumsily before rushing back to Robert's shoulder, claws digging into the fabric of his shirt, clinging to the only safety he had ever known. But Robert didn't give up. The next day, he tried again, and again, and again. Each time, Oliver grew a little braver. He flew short distances, first to the garden fence, then to the branches of a nearby tree. And eventually, one morning, as the sun rose in a blaze of orange and pink, Oliver spread his wings and soared high above the yard, circling the sky with grace and freedom Robert had never seen before. Tears filled Robert's eyes. His parrot was finally free. But here's the most beautiful part. Even after Oliver discovered freedom, he always came back. Each evening, as the sky darkened and the stars began to shine, Oliver would return. He would land on Robert's shoulder, nuzzle against his cheek, and rest. Freedom didn't mean losing the bond they shared. It meant discovering something greater, living fully, without fear, and still choosing to return to love. Watching Oliver, Robert felt something shift inside him. If his parrot could learn to fly after years of believing he couldn't, maybe he could too. Maybe it wasn't too late to step out of his cage. And so, Robert began to change. He started small. He joined a local hiking group, even though he felt nervous around strangers. He began volunteering at the library, teaching kids to read, something Susan had always dreamed of doing. He took short road trips, visiting places he had only read about in books. And slowly, with each step, Robert began to feel alive again. He realized something powerful. Freedom is never just about the absence of walls. It's about the presence of courage. It's about daring to spread your wings even when you're scared. And it's about trusting that even if you stumble, even if you fall, you can try again until you discover the sky that has been waiting for you all along. Now let's pause here, because this is where the story turns from being about Robert and Oliver to being about you and me. How many of us live in cages we can't see? Maybe your cage is a job that drains you, but you stay because it feels safe. Maybe your cage is a relationship that keeps you small, but you're too afraid to leave. Maybe your cage is self-doubt, the quiet voice that whispers you're not good enough, so you never try to chase the dream you carry inside. Like Oliver, many of us perch at the edge of the open door. We look out at freedom, at possibility, at life. But when fear rises, we step back into what is familiar, even if it holds us back. Here's the truth. The door is already open. Your freedom is waiting. The only question is whether you believe you deserve it. Oliver's first flight was shaky and uncertain. He almost fell, but he tried again and again until he discovered the strength of his own wings. And the same is true for us. The first step outside your cage, whether it's applying for that job, ending what no longer serves you, or finally daring to chase your dream, might feel terrifying. But each attempt makes you stronger. Each moment of courage builds your wings. And when you finally fly, you'll realize something incredible. Freedom doesn't take you away from love, safety, or belonging. It deepens them. It transforms them. It gives you the chance to live fully, not fearfully. So I ask you now, what's your cage? What bars have you accepted as permanent, even though the door is already open? Maybe today is the day to step through. Maybe today is the day to believe in the strength of your wings. Remember this, cages aren't always made of bars. They're made of fear, doubt, and the stories we tell ourselves. But wings are made of courage, hope, and the belief that you were meant for more than a life lived small. And when you take that leap, when you choose freedom, you will discover what Robert and Oliver did, that the sky has always been waiting and that you were made to fly.